Page 8. Palestine. Hundreds of Arabs from Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Egypt, and Palestine were receiving training for immediate operations. 16. The invaders on January 9th numbered about 400. They came across the frontiers in motor trucks and attacked the Jewish villages in 2 waves. They were equipped with modern automatic weapons and wore uniforms similar to those of the Syrian army. A battle between them and the Jewish settlers, led by Haganah commanders, raged for 3.5 hours before British troops, supported by artillery and Royal Air Force, Spitfires intervened to bring the situation under control. 3 Jews were killed and 8 were wounded. The Arabs left some 25 dead. 17. The objects of the attack were varied. According to reliable reports, there was a desire to test the effects of this frontier violation on United Nations opinion, and it is significant that the aggression coincided with the first meeting of the United Nations Implementation Commission. Another object was to provide cover for the infiltration of Syrian volunteers into Palestine territory. According to a well-authenticated report from Damascus, 900 men commanded by Akram Karani moved by truck through Lebanon and crossed into Palestine near Beit Jabil. Another 600 commanded by Abed Shisbekli entered Palestine by the bridge known as Jisr Banat Yaqub. The same source is probably correct in defining the main object of the attack as an effort to sustain Arab morale, which needed some sensational victory, such as the capture of a town, that would electrify the Arab world and stir the doubting into action. 18. On January 12, the British Foreign Office announced that the British minister in Damascus had called for information from the Syrian government and had expressed the concern of the United Kingdom government over the attack and asked that action be taken to prevent the situation from being aggravated. 19. No secret was made of official Syrian and Lebanese complicity with these attacks. On January 10, a Palestinian Arab daily, 5 reported that the Syrian Defense Minister Ahmed Sharabadi had arrived in Lebanon on Thursday, January 8, with a convoy of 30 lorries carrying 700 Arab recruits from Syria on their way to Merj Ayoun on the Palestine-Lebanese frontier. The British station Broad. 1. New York Times, January 19, 1948. 2. New York Times, January 18, 1948. 3. New York Times, January 18, 1948. 4. New York Times, January 13, 1948. 5. Al-Shab, Jaffa. Page 9. Casting in Arabic from Jaffa, Sharq al-Adna, stated that the Lebanese defense minister, Majid Bey Arslan, had similarly gone to Merj Ayoun for an important meeting of the Palestine Defense and Liberation Army. 20. Following a request from the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Lebanese Chamber of Deputies, the Prime Minister and Defense Minister reported to the chamber on January 14, 1948, on the progress of current aid to the Palestine Arabs. All Lebanese newspapers carried accounts of these proceedings, whose highlights are the following. The Prime Minister stated that Arab governments are determined to fight the partition of Palestine with all their force. He emphasized that the Arab states have not recognized and will never recognize the United Nations decision on Palestine. The Defense Minister gave what he called an eyewitness account of Arab attacks on Jewish villages in northern Palestine. These attacks, he said, would be strengthened and would take the shape of a real war in the near future. He added that all activities, such as the collection of funds, registration and training of volunteers, assembling of arms, etc., are being supervised by himself and the Syrian Defense Minister in accordance with the resolutions adopted at the recent Premiers' Conference in Cairo. 1. Meanwhile in Damascus, the Syrian Defense Minister, Ahmed Sharabadi, made a statement containing his impressions of the engagement at Dan and threatening a direct frontal attack on Jewish forces in about a month. 2. Attack on Dan and Lehavit. 21. The attack of January 9th appears to have established a precedent for the free crossing of the Syrian-Palestine border by Arab volunteers. On January 14th, Arabs from Syria again attacked the Jewish settlement of Dan and the younger settlement of Lehavit for miles south of Dan, blowing up the community's water source and damaging its fish ponds. This attack originated at Shuda, just across the Syrian border. A British official announcement said that British troops from Metalla drove the Arabs off in a battle, which lasted an hour and a half. The Arabs left 1 dead and withdrew into Syria. 3. 1. Speeches in the Lebanese Chamber of Deputies, January 14, 1948. 2. New York Times, January 10, 1948. 3. AP, January 14, 1948. Page 10. Attack on Yaim. 22. On January 21st, a force of about 400 Arabs crossed the Lebanon-Palestine border and attacked the Jewish village of Yaim, 20 miles east of Nahariya, in western Galilee. 9 Jews, including 5 settlement policemen, were killed. The attack began at 7 a.m. and lasted 5 hours, during which time Arabs cut all the bridges and culverts leading to the village. The battle raged for 6 hours before British troops arrived. There are 60 adult Jewish settlers at Yaim. 23. On January 22nd, a smaller Arab force again crossed the frontier, renewed the attack on Yaim, and was driven off with heavy casualties. These attacks on January 21st and 22nd were carried out by well-organized uniformed companies, with covering support from mortars. 1. 24. Men who infiltrated into Palestine under cover of these attacks have taken part in assaults on Jews in many parts of the country. Syrian and Iraqi units have been observed as snipers in Haifa, in attacks on Ramat Rahel, near Jerusalem, and Kfar Etzion, near Hebron, and elsewhere, too. Aggression by units of the Transjordan Arab Legion. 25. The acts of aggression described above have involved the violation of the Palestinian frontier at the instigation and behest of the Syrian and Lebanese governments in order to commit wanton and murderous aggression against peaceful Jewish villages and to bring about a political settlement which the General Assembly has condemned by methods which the Charter forbids. Murderous acts against the Jewish population have also been committed by the Transjordan Arab Legion, a foreign army maintained in Palestine under British command. These acts, for which the responsibility falls on the mandatory government, will be described in a separate submission by the Jewish Agency. Summary of direct acts of aggression already committed. 26. The following chapter, dealing with preparations for future onslaughts on the Jews, in violation of the Charter, and in defiance of the General Assembly's decision, will make it clear that the main phase of Arab aggression is still to come. Yet it would be futile to ignore. 1. New York Times, January 22, 23, 1948. 2. AP Jerusalem, January 4, 1948, reported Syrians, Lebanese, and Transjordanians have filtered into Jerusalem to swell the ranks of Sheikh Bakri, leader of Arab group in the Old City of Jerusalem. Page 11. The fact that aggression has already begun, and that the atmosphere of impunity in which it has been committed must serve as an encouragement to more ambitious violence in the future. The Syrian and Lebanese governments have already assembled, organized, equipped, and dispatched Arab forces to commit aggressive acts against peaceful Jewish communities in territory wherein Syria and Lebanon have no right of access or jurisdiction at all. Syria is a member of the Security Council, on which the Charter, Article 24, confers primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security. Yet it is on Syrian territory, with the active support of the Syrian government, that forces have been and are being armed and organized for frontier violation, aggression, and attempts to overthrow a decision of the General Assembly by force. The Lebanon, with other Arab states, sponsored in the General Assembly a resolution on illegal immigration amidst many eloquent protestations on the inviolability of frontiers. Yet the Lebanese and Syrian frontiers offer free passage for unauthorized entry of men and arms into Palestine under the personal supervision of the defense ministers concerned with the avowed object of disturbing international peace and security. In Beirut and Damascus respectively, in close touch and collusion with the governments concerned, the two main instigators of the present disturbance and warfare in Palestine have their abode. Haj Amin al-Husseini, ex-Mufti of Jerusalem, and Fawzi al-Kawukji, his accomplice as leader of the Arab Rebellion in 1936. Since the report of the British Royal Commission 1 signaled these men out for primary guilt in the organization of bloodshed a decade ago, they have managed to perfect their aggressive techniques and ideologies through long residence during the war in Nazi Germany as allies of the Hitler regime. Through them, this attack on the very soul of the Charter is connected, in an invidious but appropriate lineage, with the scourge of war from which the United Nations aspires to save succeeding generations of mankind. 2:27. The Jewish Agency submits that the relatively limited scope of these acts of aggression within the past 2 months does not absolve the United Nations from the necessity of taking steps to suppress breaches of the peace and acts of aggression. It is submitted that only firm and timely international action can avert the full unfolding of the aggressive design, which is now being prepared by certain member states of the United Nations. 1 Royal Commission Report, Chapter 4, Paragraph 14. 2. Another such link is provided by the Arab commander in Jaffa and Lydda, Sheikh Hassan Salameh, who was described by Mr. Emil Guri on December 31, 1947, as one of the most active men in the field. New York Times, January 4, 1948. Sheikh Salameh was dropped in Palestine by parachute as a German major for sabotage duties in 1944. Page 12. C. Preparations for aggression by Arab states against Jews of Palestine and United Nations agencies. 28. The violent propaganda organized by Arab governments in recent weeks, the 3 acts of aggression committed by Syria and Lebanon, and the current infiltration of officially sponsored volunteers are merely the prelude for the main phase of Arab aggression, which is planned to take place in the near future. The Arab League spokesman, Asad Dagher, in his statement on January 15, indicated that the end of the British Mandate would be the signal for the occupation of the whole of Palestine by armies of the Arab states. 1. The Syrian Defense Minister, Ahmed Sharbati, however, declared on January 13, on his return from the operations based on Merj Ayun against Dan and Kfar Zold, that a direct frontal attack against Jewish forces can be expected in about a month from the Arab People's Army. Full-scale training and arming are progressing. 2. Recruiting and training in Syria. 29. According to the Cairo paper, Al-Zaman of December 17, the Arab League Council entrusted the Syrian government with the task of organizing the popular movement for the rescue of Palestine. Damascus, by all accounts, is now the center of a well-organized movement under the direction of the Syrian Ministry of National Defense, Ahmed Sharbati, for the recruiting, training, and equipment of Palestinian and non-Palestinian Arabs who are to form a people's army for the invasion of Palestine. The Cairo newspaper, Al-Ahram, reported on December 15 that about 700 Palestinian Arabs are already training in Katana barracks near Damascus. Their number is growing by about 100 a day. Later, the recruiting movement in Damascus began to embrace Syrian nationals as well. On December 4, Arif Nakati, governor of Jebel Druz, announced the beginning of recruitment in his area, especially for Druzes who were made for war, and war was made for them. 3. The military commander of Aleppo, Jamil al-Barani, announced that recruiting in the northern provinces would begin on December 8. 4. On December 7, the Damascus newspaper Al-Akhbar reported that the Ministry of National Defense had announced that special recruiting offices would be open to Bedouins, who are inclined by nature to draw the sword. 1 New York Times, January 16. 2 AP Damascus, January 13. 3 Al-Jabal, Damascus, December 4. 4 Al-Insha, Damascus, December 7. Page 13. 30. On December 27, it was reliably reported that 38 senior officers of the Syrian army had resigned to help train a voluntary corps. On December 19, the Syrian Defense Ministry announced its acceptance of the resignations, particularly of army officers who wished to volunteer for service in Palestine to fight against partition. The number of those resigning was not immediately discussed. 1. The leader of the recruiting movement is Fawzi al-Kawukji, who informed the press on December 9 that 15,000 volunteers were due to complete training at an early date. 2. Apart from Syrians, the trainees at the Katana camp include Palestinians from Jenin, Nablus, and Hebron, a group of Lebanese Muslims, a number of young Iraqis who took part in the pro-Nazi revolt under Rashid Ali, and a group of young Egyptians headed by their leader Ahmed Hussein. 8. According to information at the disposal of the Jewish Agency, the number of volunteers in Syria is presently as follows. Damascus 5,700, Aleppo 5,000. Rest of Syria 5,000. Of these, 950 volunteers from Damascus and 400 from Aleppo are now under training in addition to the 420 fully equipped Palestinian volunteers in Katana camp. Recruiting and training in Lebanon. 31. In Lebanon, recruiting preparations are also in full swing. On December 18, the British Near East Broadcasting Station in Jaffa reported that the first group of 500 volunteers who had enlisted for service in the defense of Palestine had been called up for training by the Beirut Recruiting Office. Earlier in December, the Mufti of Lebanon, Muhammad Tawfiq Khalid, made a public fatwa ruling declaring a holy war in Palestine. 4. The Egyptian newspaper, Ras el-Yusuf, reported on December 10 that Lebanese volunteers have held maneuvers near Baalbek, using a number of batteries, which were put at their disposal by the High Command of the Lebanese Army. Recruiting and training in Egypt. 32. On December 14, the Damascus newspaper, Al-Insha, reported, Ahmed Hussein, leader of the Young Egypt Party, has arrived in Damascus and entered the Katana barracks for training. 1. AFP Damascus, December 19. 2. AP Damascus, December 9. 3. Kabas, Damascus, December 12. 4. Beirut, Daily Newspaper, December 4. Page 14. He began negotiations with Shukri Quatli, the Syrian president, and Fawzi al-Qawuqji about forming a detachment of young Egyptians to be named after Mustafa al-Wakil, an Egyptian who collaborated with the Nazis during the war and died in Germany. On December 16, the Journal d'Egypte reported that the Egyptian cabinet had authorized the establishment of recruiting offices for volunteers. On December 23, the Cairo newspaper, Al-Ahram, published a letter from Ahmed Hussein, giving full details of the progress of his work in the Katana barracks. The Egyptian press reflects the impatience of militant elements with what they regard as a cautious attitude of their government in this recruiting movement. Criticism has been directed against the government at the party meetings of Young Egypt, Al-Ahram, December 19, the Wafd al-Musawwar, December 21, and the Liberal Party, Al-Ahram, December 17. It would be a fair description of the position in Egypt to say that while the recruitment of volunteers for aggression in Palestine lacks something of the governmental drive which is freely given in Syria, voluntary activity for these purposes is sponsored by the Egyptian government and is encouraged by the militant leaders of the Arab League Secretariat, which has its abode in Cairo. That this movement is gathering strength is clear from the New York Times, which reported on January 20. Members of the Qawuqji staff said they had been negotiating with Arab groups in Egypt. They said the Nationalist Party and the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt were contributing most of the men for a force that would cross the Sinai Desert to attack Jewish settlements in the south, while the Qawuqji force operated from the Nablus area. Recruiting and training in Iraq. 33. Recruiting offices of the Committee for the Rescue of Palestine were opened in Baghdad on December 8. 1. On December 12, a number of Iraqi young men who had participated in the pro-Nazi Rashid Ali rebellion in Iraq of 1941 arrived in Damascus and put themselves at Fawzi al-Qawuqji's disposal, too. On January 17, 1948, the Egyptian newspaper Al-Masri reported that Jamal Husseini had stated after visiting the Iraqi vice premier that a well-organized Arab commando group was being formed in Iraq for special assignments in Palestine. 34. On December 27, Colonel Taher Muhammad, a member of the Palestine Defense Committee, stated that 2 regiments of volunteers will be sent to Palestine within a week to fight for the Arabs. 1. Al-Sa'eh, December 9. 2. Al-Kabas, Damascus, December 12.